the 20th century, a period when humanity experienced its greatest scientific and technological breakthroughs. Airplanes conquered the skies, cities grew, and the modern world was taking shape. However, the same century also witnessed one of the most systematic and horrific mass exterminations in history. The name of the place that became the symbol of this darkness was Auschwitz-Birkenau. Today, this camp complex, located within the borders of Poland, is where more than 1 million people lost their lives. But Auschwitz was not just a concentration camp. It was the most striking example of how ideology, bureaucracy, and technology could combine to drag humanity into a catastrophe. It all began with the rise of a radical ideology in Germany. In 1933, Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party came to power. An extreme nationalist and anti-Semitic worldview became state policy. According to this ideology, society had to be purified. Jews, primarily, but also Roma, disabled people, homosexuals, and Soviet prisoners of war. And anyone opposed to the regime were defined as undesirable. Propaganda was the most powerful weapon in this process. Newspapers, radios, cinema films, and school books normalized hate speech. First, the other was created in people's minds. Then, this other was dehumanized. A group of people was transformed from neighbors into enemies. First, economic rights were restricted. Then, citizenship rights were taken away. Businesses were boycotted. Children were humiliated in schools. Social exclusion gradually turned into physical segregation. Ghettos were established. Especially in occupied Poland, hundreds of thousands of people were confined to cramped areas. Hunger, epidemics, and despair became the daily reality of the ghettos. But for the Nazi regime, this was not enough. The plan, implemented from 1941 onwards and called the Final Solution, aimed at the complete annihilation of Jews in Europe. Auschwitz would be one of the central points of this plan. Auschwitz was initially established for Polish political prisoners. However, over time it turned into a massive camp complex. The main camp consisted of the Birkenau and Monowitz sections. Birkenau, in particular, was used as both a collection and extermination center. Here, death was transformed into a planned and organized process. People were brought by train from all over Europe. Hundreds of people were crammed into closed wagons designed to transport animals, left without water and food during journeys lasting for days. Some died during the journey. Those who survived faced a selection at the camp entrance. SS officers and camp doctors divided the arrivals into two groups. Those able to work went to one side. The elderly, children, and those appearing ill went to the other. The second group was usually sent directly to the gas chambers. Those deemed fit for work had their hair cut, their belongings taken, and numbers tattooed on their arms. Names were erased, identities destroyed. Daily life in the camp was unbearable. Barracks were overcrowded. People slept on wooden bunks, one on top of another. The daily food ration was too little to survive. Hunger had become a chronic torture. Diseases spread rapidly, and those who became weak were sent for extermination in the next selection. Forced labor was an important part of the system. Prisoners were forced to work in stone quarries, factories, and industrial facilities. Those who became unable to work were considered useless and sent to their deaths. The gas chambers were the most horrific reality of the camp. People were told they would take showers. The doors were closed, and poisonous gas was released inside. Hundreds of people died within minutes. Then, the bodies were burned in crematoria. Death operated in a cold, orderly fashion. Some prisoners were subjected to so-called medical experiments. Inhuman practices were carried out in the name of science. The human body was reduced to an experimental object. In 1944, the camp experienced its most intense period. However, the tide of the war was turning. As the Soviet army advanced, the Nazi administration decided to evacuate the camp. Tens of thousands of prisoners were marched for miles in the middle of winter. These evacuations were known as death marches. Thousands died along the way. On 27th of January, 1945, Soviet soldiers reached the camp. Approximately 7,000 people had survived. Tons of shoes, suitcases, glasses, and human hair were found in the warehouses. These were the silent proofs of what had happened there. In the post-war period, Nazi leaders were tried in international courts. But no judgment could bring back the millions of lives lost. Today, Auschwitz continues to exist as a museum and memorial site. Millions of people visit it every year. Walking through the barbed wire fences, one confronts one of the darkest pages in human history. The story of Auschwitz shows us this. When hatred and discrimination become normalized, the result is catastrophe. This tragedy did not happen all at once. It progressed step by step. Therefore, we must remember, because forgotten history carries the risk of repeating itself. Auschwitz is more than a place. It is the mirror of humanity, and we must look into that mirror.